Have you ever watched someone smile while quietly stealing something that meant the world to you? Not money, not jewelry, something far more valuable, a promise. Mine did. And by the time they realized what I'd done in return, they were standing helpless at a cruise terminal thousands of miles from home. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, if you've ever dreamed of watching karma arrive without raising your voice, then you're in the right place. Hit that like button, subscribe, and settle in. Because today's story isn't about revenge fueled by rage. It's about patience, dignity, and the sweetest kind of justice. Some people explode when they're betrayed. They slam doors, they scream, they throw things they can never take back. I don't. I smile. Then, I make plans. My name is Daniel Carter. I'm 54 years old, a retired logistics supervisor from Boston. I've spent my entire life solving problems without losing my temper. Years in my profession taught me something simple. Emotions make people careless. Patience wins. My late wife used to tease me about it. Danny, she'd laugh. You could watch your house catch fire and still stop to make coffee before calling the fire department. Maybe she was right. Or maybe she just understood me better than anyone ever could. Her name was Grace. She was the kind of woman who remembered every birthday, every anniversary, every tiny detail that made people feel loved. She laughed with her whole heart, even at terrible jokes. She believed every difficult season eventually ended. 3 years ago, cancer stole her from me. Not all at once. Slowly, cruelly, I watched the strongest woman I'd ever known become weaker every week, yet somehow she spent her final months comforting me instead of herself. "You'll keep living," she whispered one evening, while we watched rain race down the kitchen window. "You promised me that." I promised. At the time, I had no idea how impossible that promise would become. After she was gone, the house felt enormous. Silence echoed through every hallway. Her favorite chair stayed exactly where she'd left it. Sometimes I'd catch myself listening for her footsteps before remembering there would never be any again. Grief is strange. People say it gets easier. They're wrong. It never gets lighter. You simply grow stronger carrying it. Nearly 2 years after her funeral, while organizing old files on her laptop, I discovered a folder named One Day. Inside were hundreds of saved photographs. Santorini's white cliffs glowing under sunset. The Amalfi Coast. Croatia's ancient stone streets. Small cafes overlooking the Mediterranean Sea. Every image had little notes she'd written beneath them. "Danny would love this bakery. We have to see this together." One day, I cried harder that afternoon than I had during the funeral. Right there at the dining room table. Coffee growing cold beside me. I made a decision. I wasn't taking that cruise to move on. I hated those words. Nobody moves on from real love. I was taking the trip because it belonged to us. If Grace couldn't stand beside me, I'd carry her memory beside me instead. For 14 months I planned every detail, every excursion, every dinner reservation, every sunrise I wanted to watch from my private balcony. It wasn't just a vacation. It was the final promise I'd ever keep to the woman who gave me 27 unforgettable years. I paid nearly $7,000. Every penny came from savings I'd carefully built after her passing. When I finally booked the balcony suite, I remember smiling for the first time in months. I could almost hear Grace whisper, "See, I told you we'd make it here someday." I had no idea someone else had already decided that my dream belonged to them. And the worst part? The betrayal wasn't coming from a stranger. It was coming from someone I called family. The first person I told about the cruise was my daughter Emily. She was 29, smart, compassionate, and stubborn in exactly the same way her mother had been. Whenever she smiled, I caught flashes of Grace's face. Whenever she laughed, the empty house felt alive again. For years, Emily had been my reason to keep moving forward. So when she started dating Ryan Mitchell, I did what every father does. I tried. Ryan wasn't a bad man. Quiet, respectful, worked as a financial analyst. He shook my hand firmly and looked me in the eye. I genuinely believed he loved my daughter. The problem wasn't Ryan. It was his mother, Margaret Sinclair. Some people demand attention. Margaret expected worship. She walked into every room as if she'd been invited to judge everyone inside it. She corrected restaurant servers over wine she couldn't pronounce. She criticized people's homes while smiling politely. Every compliment from her carried a hidden insult. "Oh, Daniel," she'd once said while looking around my house, "it's so cozy, cozy." That single word somehow managed to insult my home, my finances, and my taste all at once. Grace would have squeezed my hand beneath the table and whispered, "Ignore her." So I did, for Emily's sake. I convinced myself peace was worth swallowing my pride. Looking back, that was my biggest mistake. One rainy Thursday morning, I sat at my kitchen table reading the newspaper with a mug of black coffee warming my hands. The same chair, the same table where I discovered Grace's travel folder. My phone buzzed. Emily calling. I answered immediately. "Morning, sweetheart." Her voice sounded wrong, too careful. "Dad, everything okay?" A long silence. Then she quietly said, "I need you to stay calm." Whenever someone says those words, you instantly know you're about to hear something that guarantees you won't. "I think," another pause, "you should cancel your cruise." I frowned. "What?" "It's probably for the best." The words felt strange. "Foreign, I've already paid for everything." "I know. It's non-refundable." "I know. So why exactly should I cancel?" Emily inhaled slowly. "Ryan and I have had unexpected expenses. His car, some medical bills, and Margaret's business hasn't been doing very well." I blinked. "What does any of that have to do with my vacation?" More silence. Then she said something that made my stomach tighten. "Margaret thinks it doesn't make sense for you to spend that much money right now." I lowered my coffee cup very carefully. "Margaret thinks?" She was just trying to help. "No," I shook my head, although Emily couldn't see me. "Help whom?" She didn't answer. Instead, she quietly whispered, "Maybe this trip can wait." Wait? 14 months of planning. 3 years of grieving. A promise to my wife. Reduced to one careless sentence. Something inside my chest began tightening. "Emily." My voice remained calm. Too calm. "Were you planning on coming with me?" "No." "So whose opinion exactly matters here besides mine?" She hesitated, then quickly changed the subject. "I'll call you later." Before I could ask another question, she hung up. I stared at the phone for nearly a minute. Nothing about that conversation made sense. Emily knew what that cruise meant. She had helped me choose excursions. She'd cried with me while looking through Grace's old photographs. She knew. So why was she suddenly trying to convince me to give it up? I told myself there had to be another explanation. There always was. I poured another cup of coffee, looked out at the gray Boston sky, and convinced myself the whole thing would make sense tomorrow. I was wrong. Because the next morning, my phone rang again. This time, the caller wasn't my daughter. It was Margaret Sinclair herself. And before that conversation ended, I realized they hadn't been asking me to cancel the cruise. They'd already decided who was going to take my cabin instead. The next morning, my phone rang at exactly 8:12 a.m. I didn't recognize the number. Normally, I would have ignored it. Instead, something in my gut told me to answer. "Hello?" A cheerful voice exploded through the speaker. "Daniel. Good morning." Margaret Sinclair. The way she said her own name made it sound like I should have been honored she'd called. I leaned back in my chair. "Morning, Margaret. I just wanted to personally thank you." I frowned. "For what?" A short laugh floated through the phone. "You've been incredibly generous. Ryan and Emily told me everything." My fingers tightened around the coffee mug. "Everything?" "Oh yes. They said you understood completely." "Understood? What exactly?" Another tiny laugh. The kind people use when they think they're speaking to someone slow. "The cruise, of course." Every muscle in my body froze. "What about it?" "Giving me your balcony suite." Silence, not the awkward kind. The dangerous kind. The kind that settles over a room just before lightning strikes. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. Repeat that." Margaret sounded almost offended. "Oh, Daniel, you don't have to pretend. Emily said you agreed to transfer the reservation. You weren't really going anymore." I told her I'd be happy to reimburse whatever transfer fees there were. I slowly placed my coffee on the table. My heartbeat had become strangely calm, almost peaceful. People imagine betrayal feels like a knife. It doesn't. It's colder than that. It feels like someone quietly reaches into your chest and removes every reason you ever had to trust them. "I think," I said carefully, "there's been a misunderstanding." "Oh?" "I haven't canceled my cruise." Silence. This time, it came from Margaret. Then she laughed again. "No need to be modest. Emily already gave us the reservation number." My heart skipped once. Reservation number? How? Only 3 people had it. Me, the travel agent, and Emily. Margaret continued talking as though she'd already won. We're absolutely thrilled. Faith has never seen Greece, and I've always wanted one of those balcony cabins. She sighed dramatically. They sell out so quickly. I wasn't listening anymore. The room around me felt distant. My eyes drifted toward the framed photograph sitting beside the window. Grace, smiling, wind blowing through her hair. The same smile she'd worn the day we'd promised each other we'd travel after retirement. That wasn't just a vacation. It wasn't just a room. It wasn't even just a cruise. It was the last promise I had left to keep, and someone was trying to steal it, without even asking. Margaret. Yes? My cabin. I spoke slowly enough that every word landed like stone. Was never yours. Before she could answer, I ended the call. 40 seconds later, Emily answered before the second ring. Dad, no. My voice remained perfectly steady. You don't get to call me Dad until you explain exactly what's happening. She started crying immediately. I never meant. Did you give Margaret my booking information? Silence, Emily. Yes. I closed my eyes. Why? She kept asking. Ryan kept saying it would make everyone happy. She said you were being selfish spending that much money on yourself. She promised she'd pay you back. She said I don't care what she said. My voice stayed flat. Cold, controlled. Did you tell her I agreed? No. Did you tell her I was canceling? Another silence. Longer this time, she assumed. And you didn't correct her. Emily began sobbing harder. I didn't know how. I stood up and walked toward the living room window. Snow drifted quietly outside. Boston looked peaceful. Inside, everything had changed. Emily, I'm sorry. I know. I made a mistake. You did. I just wanted everyone to get along. I stared at Grace's photograph, then whispered words I never imagined saying to my own daughter. You chose someone else's happiness over your father's promise to your mother. Emily broke completely. I know. I'm so sorry. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, Please don't do anything. I almost smiled. Because she still believed I was angry. She still thought I'd yell, argue, threaten. She had no idea what happens when a patient man finally reaches his limit. I'm not angry, Emily. Those words frightened her more than shouting ever could. I'm simply finished being taken for granted. I ended the call. Then I opened my laptop. People think revenge begins with rage. They're wrong. Rage is loud, messy, temporary. Real revenge begins with a quiet decision. A single choice. One that nobody notices until it's far too late. And by lunchtime, I'd already made mine. People often mistake silence for weakness. They assume that if you don't argue, you must have accepted defeat. If you don't shout, you must be afraid. That's the mistake Margaret made, and it was about to cost her far more than a balcony cabin. I opened my laptop and called my travel agent. Her name was Linda Harper, and we'd worked together for over a year planning Grace's dream vacation. She answered on the second ring. Good morning, Daniel. Ready for Barcelona? Not exactly. Something in my voice made her stop typing. What's wrong? I took a slow breath. Has anyone besides me contacted you about my reservation? Silence. Then I heard her keyboard clicking. Actually, yes, several times. My stomach tightened. A woman claiming to be your family representative has been calling all week. She wanted your booking number confirmed. She asked about changing passenger names. And yesterday she tried to convince one of our staff that you'd authorized the transfer. I closed my eyes. So they actually tried. I'm afraid so. Linda sounded genuinely upset. We refused every request because nothing matched our security procedures. Relief washed over me. At least one person had done the right thing. I need you to do something. Anything. I want you to cancel my reservation. She gasped. What? I said cancel it. But Daniel, you've spent 14 months planning this. I know. You'll lose the balcony suite. I know. And someone else could book it. I smiled for the first time in days. Exactly. She paused. Daniel, what are you planning? Nothing illegal. Another pause. Then she laughed softly. I've known you long enough to know that answer means somebody deserves whatever happens next. For the next 45 minutes, we reviewed every available Mediterranean cruise, leaving the same week. Finally, Linda spoke. I found something. What is it? The Ocean Sovereign. It's smaller, far more luxurious. Top deck, private sky suite, panoramic balcony. But, it's almost $3,000 more. I looked toward Grace's photograph. Money comes back. Moments don't. Book it. You don't even want to think about it? I already have. Within minutes, the confirmation email arrived. A better ship, a larger suite, a private butler, more destinations, better restaurants, and a balcony nearly twice the size of the original one. Sometimes life rewards people who refuse to quit. What about your original reservation? Linda asked. Release it. Completely? Every part of it. She hesitated. You understand what that'll mean? Oh, I understand perfectly. The booking disappeared from the system. The cabin returned to public inventory. Within minutes, someone else reserved it. Just like that. It was gone. Forever. Exactly as I'd hoped. 3 weeks later, I drove to Logan International Airport before sunrise. 1 suitcase. 1 passport. 1 folded photograph of Grace tucked safely inside my wallet. I told nobody. Not Emily. Not Ryan. Not a single friend. As far as everyone else knew, I'd canceled the vacation. The flight to Barcelona felt strangely peaceful. For the first time in months, my shoulders felt light, as if Grace were sitting beside me, smiling quietly out the window. When the plane landed, warm Mediterranean air greeted me like an old friend. The scent of salt water, fresh coffee drifting from nearby cafes, seagulls circling above the harbor. It felt right. A taxi carried me to the port. Standing there were 2 magnificent cruise ships. One was the Ocean Sovereign, elegant, modern, waiting for me. The other was the very ship Margaret believed she'd stolen from me. I watched passengers lining up to board. Somewhere in that crowd, Margaret Sinclair was smiling. She probably imagined herself stepping onto her balcony, taking photos, showing off to friends, posting pictures online with captions about luxury and success. She had no idea the reservation she'd been bragging about didn't even exist anymore. I checked into my suite. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the endless blue Mediterranean. A bottle of champagne rested on the table. Fresh flowers filled the room. Outside, the private balcony stretched toward the sea. I stepped outside, closed my eyes, and whispered, "We made it, Grace." The breeze answered softly. Then my phone vibrated. 1 missed call. Emily. I didn't answer. Not because I hated her. Not because I wanted revenge against my daughter. Because after 3 years of grief, after months of manipulation, after 14 months of planning, I had finally begun keeping my promise to Grace. Nothing, and no one, was going to interrupt it. What I didn't know was that, at that exact moment, across the harbor, Margaret Sinclair was walking toward the check-in desk, smiling confidently, ready to claim a balcony suite that had vanished without a trace. The first morning aboard the Ocean Sovereign, I woke before sunrise. For a few moments, I simply lay in bed, listening. No traffic. No ringing phones. No neighbors mowing their lawns. Only the soft rhythm of waves tapping against the hull. It was the kind of silence Grace used to love. I slid open the balcony doors and stepped outside. The Mediterranean stretched endlessly before me, glowing gold beneath the rising sun. A cool breeze brushed against my face, carrying the scent of salt and fresh coffee from the cafe below. I rested both hands on the railing. We finally made it, I whispered. For the first time since losing Grace, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. My phone vibrated. Emily, 4 missed calls. I looked at the screen for a moment before placing it face down on the table. I wasn't ignoring her to punish her. I was protecting the only thing nobody could take from me anymore. This trip. These memories. This promise. While I enjoyed breakfast on my balcony, fresh fruit, warm croissants, scrambled eggs, and coffee stronger than anything back home, my phone kept buzzing. 5 missed calls. Then 8. Then 12. By lunchtime there were more than 20. I never answered. Instead, I spent the afternoon wandering through Barcelona's narrow streets before the ship departed. Street musicians filled the air with Spanish guitar. Children chased pigeons across old stone squares. Couples laughed over tiny cafe tables. For a few beautiful hours, life felt normal again. Meanwhile, across the harbor, Margaret Sinclair's perfect vacation was falling apart. I wouldn't learn the full story until later, but witnesses described it almost exactly the same way. She marched confidently toward the Horizon Princess check-in counter wearing oversized sunglasses and an expensive white designer outfit. Behind her walked Ryan's younger sister Olivia, quietly pulling 2 large suitcases. Margaret handed the employee a printed confirmation page. "Balcony suite," she announced proudly. The employee smiled politely, typed for several seconds, then frowned. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I can't locate this reservation." Margaret laughed. "Try again." The employee searched again. Nothing. A supervisor came over. More typing. More confused expressions. Finally, the supervisor looked directly at her. "Ma'am, this reservation was cancelled several days ago." Margaret blinked. "No, it was fully cancelled by the original passenger. There is no active booking under these names." Witnesses later said her face completely changed. "What do you mean, cancelled?" "The gentleman who made the reservation cancelled it himself. He owned the booking. We had no authority to prevent it." Margaret's confident smile disappeared. "No, that's impossible. He promised me that cabin." The supervisor remained calm. "I'm sorry, ma'am. It was never transferred into your name." According to Olivia, Margaret completely lost control. She demanded managers, threatened lawsuits, accused the cruise line of fraud, claimed someone had stolen her vacation. Employees patiently explained the same thing over and over. "You cannot steal something that never legally belonged to you." She refused to accept it. There was one final option. The ship still had a few unsold interior cabins. No balcony, no ocean view, no luxury photographs for social media. Just 4 walls, a bed, and no window. Margaret stared at the price, then realized she had no choice. If she walked away, everyone would know she never boarded the cruise she'd spent months bragging about. Swallowing every ounce of pride, she pulled out her own credit card. Thousands of dollars disappeared from her account in seconds. As the receipt printed, reality finally hit her. She hadn't stolen my dream. She'd paid full price for a far worse version of it. I knew none of this. Not yet. At that exact moment, I was sitting on my private balcony somewhere between Spain and Italy, sipping fresh espresso while reading one of Grace's favorite novels. The sea shimmered beneath the afternoon sun. A violinist played softly near the upper deck lounge. Life couldn't have felt more perfect. Then, late that evening, curiosity got the better of me. I picked up my phone. 93 unread messages. Most were from Emily. Several from Ryan. 3 were from Margaret herself. The first one read, "Daniel, please call me immediately. There has been a terrible misunderstanding." The second, "The cruise line made a serious mistake." The third message made me smile. "If this is some kind of joke, my attorney will be contacting you." I leaned back in my chair, looked out across the endless Mediterranean, then laughed. Not loudly, not cruelly, just enough to remind myself of one simple truth. The people who try to steal your peace usually end up paying the highest price for it themselves. And the best part? My greatest revenge hadn't even happened yet. By the 7th day of the cruise, the Mediterranean no longer felt like a destination. It felt like home. Every sunrise greeted me with calm blue water stretching beyond the horizon. Every evening ended with golden light dancing across the sea, just as Grace had imagined in the photos she saved years ago. I had stopped counting the ports, stopped checking the time, stopped thinking about home, until my phone connected to the ship's Wi-Fi. Within seconds, it exploded with notifications. Dozens became hundreds. Missed calls, voicemails, text messages. I sat quietly on my balcony and started reading. The first messages were from Emily. "Day 2, Dad. Please call me when you can." Day 3, Dad. Something's wrong. Day 4, please answer. Margaret is furious. Then came Ryan's messages. "Mr. Carter, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Mom says the reservation disappeared. Please call us so we can figure this out." I kept scrolling. Then I reached Margaret's messages. The confident tone she'd used only days earlier was gone. "Daniel, the cruise line says our reservation doesn't exist. There must have been an error. Call me immediately." Hours later, "This is completely unacceptable. I've contacted customer service. Then, if you've done something to embarrass me, my attorney will hear about this." I couldn't help smiling. The woman who believed she could bully everyone around her had finally encountered something she couldn't control. Consequences. Then I opened Emily's newest message. It was much longer. "Dad, I'm sorry. I lied because I couldn't stand up to Margaret. Ryan kept telling me it would make everyone happy. I convinced myself you'd understand, because you always forgive people. I know now how selfish that was. I'm so sorry. Please, just tell me you're okay." I read it twice, then a third time. The anger I'd carried for weeks slowly gave way to something else. Sadness. Emily hadn't been malicious. She'd been weak. There was a difference. Weakness can be corrected. Cruelty usually can't. I pressed the call button. She answered before the first ring finished. Dad. She was crying. Where are you? I smiled. Santorini. Silence. What? I'm sitting on the balcony of my suite in Santorini. You're on a cruise? I am. A different ship. A long silence followed. Then I heard her breathing become shaky. You knew I found out the morning Margaret thanked me for giving her my cabin. Oh my God, I canceled my reservation. And booked a better one. Emily broke down completely. I'm so ashamed. I know. I should have told her no. You should have. I hurt you. You did. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I looked across the white buildings cascading down Santorini's cliffs. The sunset painted the sea in shades of orange and gold. You don't earn being my daughter, Emily. She started crying harder. I'll always love you. But trust. I paused. Takes longer to rebuild. I understand. Before hanging up, she quietly asked, Was it beautiful? I looked around. The endless blue sea, the peaceful harbor, the gentle breeze, everything Grace had dreamed of. It was worth every mile. I wish Mom could have seen it. I smiled toward the horizon. I think she did. 3 days later, our ship docked in Dubrovnik. I stepped onto the ancient stone streets, carrying nothing more than a camera and a cup of coffee. The city looked like something from another century. Sunlight reflected off limestone walls. Church bells echoed through the narrow streets. Tourists wandered everywhere. I was waiting for my guide when I heard a voice that instantly froze me in place. I specifically paid for a premium tour. I refused to accept this. I knew that voice. Margaret. I slowly turned around. There she was, standing less than 30 feet away, arguing loudly with a local tour guide. Ryan's sister Olivia stood beside her, looking embarrassed enough to disappear into the crowd. Margaret hadn't seen me yet. I could have walked away, pretended not to notice, avoided the confrontation completely. Instead, I took a sip of my coffee, straightened my jacket, and calmly walked toward her. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't planned. Sometimes karma brings it directly to you. Dubrovnik was glowing beneath the morning sun. The ancient stone streets shimmered after an early rain, and the Adriatic Sea sparkled beyond the old city walls. Tourists wandered through the narrow alleys with cameras in hand, completely unaware that one of the most satisfying moments of my life was about to unfold. Margaret Sinclair still hadn't noticed me. She was too busy arguing with a local tour guide. I paid for the premium walking tour. She snapped. This isn't what I booked. The guide remained calm. I'm very sorry, ma'am, but the premium group is already full. That's unacceptable. I understand your frustration. No, she interrupted. You clearly don't. Some people never change. They believe that if they speak loudly enough, the world will rearrange itself to suit them. I took one last sip of my coffee. Then I walked toward her. Unhurried, relaxed, the way only a man with nothing left to prove can walk. Ryan's younger sister Olivia saw me first. Her eyes widened. Mom. Margaret turned around. The color drained from her face. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, I smiled politely. Margaret. She blinked several times. Daniel. What a small world. She glanced past me toward the harbor. That's when she saw it. Docked just across the water, the ocean sovereign. Its gleaming white hull reflected the morning sunlight. The top-deck sky suites were clearly visible, including the panoramic balcony, where I'd spent every sunrise remembering Grace. Margaret looked from the ship, back to me, then back again. Realization settled over her face. She swallowed. That's your ship? It is. You? You booked another cruise? The morning after you called to thank me for giving away something that was never yours. Silence. Heavy. Embarrassing. Unavoidable. Her jaw tightened. You did all of this on purpose. I smiled. No, I protected something that belonged to me. There's a difference. She crossed her arms. You humiliated me. I shook my head. No, Margaret, you humiliated yourself. You assumed my memories had a price. You assumed my wife's final dream could be taken because you wanted a nicer view. I took a small step closer. My voice never rose. It didn't have to. That balcony wasn't expensive because of the money. It was priceless because of the promise. You never understood that. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. For the first time since I'd met her, Margaret Sinclair had no words. Olivia quietly whispered, "Mr. Carter, I'm sorry." I nodded gently. "I know you are." She lowered her eyes. Unlike her mother, she understood accountability. Margaret finally found her voice. "I hope you're happy." I looked toward the sea, thought about Grace, thought about the sunsets, the laughter I'd rediscovered, the peace I'd finally reclaimed. Then I answered honestly, "I am. I've never been happier." Without another word, I nodded politely and walked away. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Some victories don't require an audience. 2 weeks later, I returned home. The house still missed Grace. It always would. But something inside me had changed. The weight I'd carried for 3 years felt lighter. Not because I'd gotten revenge. Because I'd kept my promise. Emily came over the following weekend. The moment she stepped inside, she hugged me tightly. "I'm so sorry, Dad, I know. I almost lost your trust." "You did." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "Can we fix it?" I smiled softly. "We already started." She cried harder. This time, they were tears of relief. Ryan apologized too. He admitted he'd allowed his mother's selfishness to influence him. He promised it would never happen again. Whether he kept that promise was up to him. But Emily had learned something far more valuable. Real family doesn't ask you to sacrifice your deepest memories to satisfy someone else's greed. As for Margaret, I never argued with her again. I never insulted her. I never sought another confrontation. I simply lived my life. Sometimes, silence is the loudest answer you'll ever give. Today, the wallpaper on my phone isn't a picture of a cruise ship. It's a photograph taken from that panoramic balcony in Santorini. The sunset fills the sky with gold and crimson. On the small table sits a glass of white wine. Beside it, Grace's old travel folder. Open to the page she'd labeled, "One Day." Every time I look at that picture, I whisper the same 4 words. "We made it. Grace." And somehow that feels like the greatest victory of all. If this story reminded you that self-respect is never selfish, hit that like button, subscribe, and let me know in the comments, what would you have done in Daniel's place? Until next time, remember this. Revenge isn't always about making someone suffer. Sometimes it's about refusing to let anyone steal your peace.